you're pitching your business, one of the big areas that people fall down on is that they try to say everything. They feel that they have to open their mouths and just launch into full scale. This is what I do, and these are all of the clients that I work with, and this is all of the different ways that I help them. And the problem with that, of course, is that when you say everything, nothing sticks, nothing is remembered. It just is too much. It's overwhelmed.
The GYFT Show is for senior business executives who've been made redundant due to the COVID-19 pandemic. They want to return to full-time employment or follow their dream by starting a business. Today, my guest is Maureen McCowen. Maureen, you're very welcome to the GYFT Show.
Thanks for having me on the show, John. Delighted to be here. Thank you.
You're very welcome. Maureen McCowen is the founder of Soft Skill Success. Her tagline is Unlock Speaking Confidence. Maureen has 30 years experience of teaching, presenting, connecting, and meeting the needs of a range of learning styles and abilities. Maureen is a member of Network Ireland, the County Kildare Chamber of Commerce, and South Dublin Chamber of Commerce. Maureen, how has the COVID-19 pandemic affected your business?
Well, like everybody, John, I suppose it started off by having a negative impact, but it has been a blessing in disguise in a lot of ways for me, because it has allowed me to have a much broader reach. I'm working with clients all around the country at this stage. I was just off a call to somebody in Cork a few moments ago, and working internationally with clients as well. And it would have been an area that I was considering doing anyway, expanding, but it was always put on the long finger. So COVID-19 forced me into adapting and changing, like a lot of people, that it's caused us to move in directions that we might not have considered otherwise. And I expect it's the same with a lot of your listeners, that they're going to be moving into new directions that they might not have otherwise considered, only for this incident that's after happening globally in a pandemic and caused us all to think things through differently.
Very good. Well, in fact, I started my professional speaking and career coaching business just as COVID-19 arrived in Ireland. But I've enjoyed the journey so far. I've stepped right out of my comfort zone and have no intention of going back to the old John.
Mm-hmm.
Maureen, I often ask myself, why do people fear public speaking so much?
It's a good question, and it's one that I suppose it depends on the individual, but I think a big part of it comes down to the feeling that we're being judged by others. And for a lot of people, that can go right back to their school days, where they were asked to stand up and to read in class, and they might have stumbled over a word or felt self-conscious, and that has stayed with them. And I think a big part of it is that we're concerned about how others see us, or if it's a case that they're thinking, well, I'm speaking and the words are coming out my mouth, but what are people thinking? Or am I making sense? Am I speaking too fast? And an awful lot of it is that internal voice that's going on inside in our head. And it's a lot of it has got to do with, slowing down and planning and preparing in as much as you can in advance for any given speaking situation, so that you feel much more comfortable and confident with what you're going to be saying.
Well, I can share my own story. I remember many years ago when I was in university, and we were doing a subject in first year called communications. And each class member had to do their turn at a 5-minute presentation on a subject of your own choice. The big day arrived, and I went up to do my presentation. I stumbled my way through, holding my notes up to my face, with no eye contact on my classmates. I distinctly remember the lecturer saying, "Mr. Burns, you failed." And I got an inferiority complex about public speaking for a number of years afterwards. And then I joined Toastmasters International, and slowly but surely, I found my feet as a public speaker. I'm now doing professional speaking. Mm-hmm. Maureen, what do you find to be the main issues with presenting online via Zoom or Microsoft Teams?
I think the big thing that clients are saying to me is that lack of connectivity. You walk into a room, you're doing a presentation in a room, you go there beforehand, even if you don't know anybody in the room, you're having that bit of chat, there's the relaxed conversation, you're building those connections, and it is much more difficult to do that online. And I was at a networking event quite recently, virtual networking event, and the person who was delivering the talk at it, everybody just logged in, and the person delivering the talk was there on their laptop with their head down, reading through their notes before delivering it, and not making any effort to try to build that same conversation or that same connection beforehand. So I think for a lot of us, we see that screen as a barrier. It is a barrier, but our job is to try to break down that barrier and to still build those connections in the same way that you would do face to face. And that's a big part of it. That's one of the challenges. And people find it very difficult as well, very often, to even know where to look. So, do they look at the camera like what I'm doing now, or do they look at the person on the screen like what I'm doing now? And there's a huge difference between the two. You're not making that connection with everybody if you're not looking at the camera. And that is actually one of the big advantages of Zoom or any of these online meetings. You can connect with everybody by looking straight into the camera. You can connect with everybody at the same time in a different way to what you could do in a room face to face. But definitely, John, I would think that connectivity, building the connection, being able to pick up on the vibes and the atmosphere in the room, that's very difficult.
Yeah.
You have to work a little bit harder.
In fact, you've answered a question I was going to ask you, which was, how do you establish emotional connection, I should say, on a Zoom or Microsoft Teams call? And the answer to that is through looking at the people in the audience, and you do it through your eye contact. Question from a member of the audience: what constitutes an ideal 60-second pitch?
Any pitch, the big part about it, if it's a pitch that you're going to have at a networking event, for example, so you're pitching your business, one of the big areas that people fall down on is that they try to say everything. They feel that they have to open their mouths and just launch into full scale, this is what I do, and these are all of the clients that I work with, and this is all of the different ways that I help them. And the problem with that, of course, is that when you say everything, nothing sticks, nothing is remembered. It just is too much, it's overwhelmed. So when I'm working with clients for 60-second pitch, we really pare it back down and take a look at all of the different categories of clients that they're working with and all of the different areas that they're helping them with and what different services they have, and then trying to get as big a global picture as possible so that you can have one sentence. That's the starting point we work on. Single sentence to describe who you help and how you help them. And then the pitch, then we're building stories around that, using client stories. Because a lot of clients that come to me say, I don't want to be boasting about the type of work that I do. And they feel they don't want to be salesy. But you can tell a lot about a client that you worked with. So why they came to you, what the problem was, how you helped them. And that's really explaining to people a lot about your way of working with people. And remembering, if it's at a networking event, the people in the room aren't necessarily going to be the people who are going to be buying from you, but they might know somebody who needs your service or your product. And that's who you really want. It's why you have to be clear on what you're saying to them. But it takes a lot of thinking through, planning it out beforehand, just going in unprepared. Like for any event, it's the same if it's an interview or any event. You go in unprepared and just open your mouth and let things flow. Chances are it's not going to go the best.
Very true. And I think there's nothing worse than when you go to a networking event where you meet people who are trying to sell to the network. You should always try to sell through the network and use the network members as a referral organization to help you get yourself clients. And you also have to bring clients to the table also. That's been my experience of networking.
Yes, yeah, very much so. It is, and it's back to that relationship side of things as well, building up relationships, getting to know what people do and making those introductions that can help people along the way. When I started my business, 2 years old today, by the way, for my business, but when I started my business and didn't have any business connections, and the different networks that I'm involved in, people were so generous with their time, their advice, and making connections and introductions for me. And I always felt I wasn't able to reciprocate. I didn't have anything to bring back to them. And I remember the first time that I was able to introduce two people together, and it was like, yes, I feel I'm paying back now for some of what I after gaining from others along the way.
What are the three stages of networking? Because I have found over the past number of years, going to networking events, preparation is so important. So what are the three stages of networking?
I would have the three stages, taking it as being before, during, and after. So if you're attending a networking event, very often if it is a networking event that the member list is available, that you can see who's going to be there. And it could be a case that you have connections in common already, or that you want to connect with somebody beforehand on LinkedIn. If you're attending a new networking event, connect with somebody beforehand on LinkedIn and say, "I'm going to be attending the networking event. Hope to see you there." You know, that you can get the ground ready, if you like. When you're at the networking event, whether it's in person or virtually, that you are doing your best to create a good, strong impression. So whether that is with your 60-second pitch, or if it is in breakout rooms, that you are listening, connecting with people, giving information about what your own business is, but also listening and asking relevant questions to the other people that are in the breakout room. And then the key part to it is the follow-up afterwards. And that follow-up could be, again, sending connection request on LinkedIn or following them on Instagram, whatever the platform is that is the most suitable for them. And not just connecting, but getting engaged with their posts, liking, sharing, commenting. And that's where you're building up your relationships there. You've got the one-to-ones, of course, that are a really important way to build up relationships with people. But if you are meeting a lot of new people at one time, first stage, very definitely follow up on whatever social media platform is going to be relevant to both of you, where there's a common interest that's there. The follow-up is really important.
Yeah. People often say that, they often talk about the power of pause. Why is pause so important in a presentation or a 60-second pitch?
Pause is important because very often when we're asked a question, again, think about it at an interview or a presentation or a pitch situation, you've got slightly different options for each of them. So we'll take it for an interview, first of all, and you're asked a question and you just launch in headfirst into what the answer is. Chances are you're going to give an answer that isn't as well structured as it could be, that you might be missing out some of the points. So giving yourself that pause gives you that moment to think, first of all. So that's in an interview situation. If you're talking about it at a presentation that you're delivering, then that pause is going to create extra impact. We were talking a few minutes ago there, John, about, how to connect with people online. So you're delivering a presentation online. Someone could be typing an email in the background or checking their phone. People's attention is distracted. But if you pause, that's pulling them straight back in, because at least they're going to look up to see what's going on. Is my sound gone? Has my Wi-Fi dropped? What's after happening? So the pause is a very important way to get people's attention and pull them back into the room. If you have an important point that you want to make and you have that pause beforehand, it's highlighting it. It's like getting a colored highlighter and putting it across that point that you are making there. And you might decide to have a pause either side of that point that you're making. The far side is to allow them to absorb that message. Whatever you're just after saying, give them a moment to process it. Could be that you ask a question at the beginning. Very often, I'm sure you've seen this lots of times as well, John, that people might start a presentation by asking a question. And, it could be, have you ever considered what you'd do if you won the lotto? Well, I have. Now, if I go straight into my answer, I'm not allowing people that moment to actually consider, what would I do if I won the lotto? And I'm losing the impact of it. So asking a question, pause, then move on. Gives them that little bit of moment. And we can be very uncomfortable with pause or silence. We sort of feel we have to be filling it all the time, but it can be very good to just pause. And of course, another thing is, if you want a moment to restructure your thoughts, gather your thoughts, or you've momentarily lost where you are, give yourself a pause. It could be a pause, have a glass of water beside you, take a drink, and just settle yourself down before you go back into it. And when it's all done calmly, nobody's going to be thinking, oh my God, she's forgotten what she was saying. You know, it's all done very calmly, professionally, and you come across very well.
I remember another speaker saying one time on a podcast that when you pause, it adds to your credibility. Moving on, how can you use vocal variety to add impact to your presentation?
That's one that's really, really important, particularly for virtual presentations, because when we are presenting virtually, people can just see us and hear us. Again, you're not picking up on that energy that's within the room. So as a presenter, you're presenting virtually, you have to bring that extra energy. So you know, whether you're sitting literally at the edge of your seat or you're deciding that you're going to stand, but your voice is another way that you're going to be able to keep people tuned in. Because if I'm speaking monotone all of the time, people are just going to switch off. They're not listening. So you need to have that vocal variety. And it's going to add extra emphasis to different points that you're making as well. So it could be that you're picking up the pace for some parts of it, but again, you're going to slow it right down when there's something that you really want people to listen and to absorb the message that you're saying, that you're going to slow what you're saying right down, make it easier for them. Whereas other parts of it, you're going to be speaking faster, or like I said, different tone that you're using, being aware, really aware of that whole energy that you need to bring for every presentation, but I think it is absolutely crucial for online.
A prospective client approaches you and they say, I'm doing a presentation in 4 weeks' time. I'm not prepared. I'm petrified of speaking in public. How can you help them to overcome their fears and do a great presentation?
First of all, I was saying well done for coming 4 weeks beforehand rather than a week or 4 days beforehand. So that's first and foremost. And I find a lot of people will feel that the first thing that they have to do is open up the slide deck and get their slides together and then put the presentation, get the presentation ready after that. Whereas in reality, it's going to be much more effective if they leave the slides until last, if they need them. That's a whole other conversation on that one, because not every presentation or speech needs slides. That's an area that a lot of people feel they have to have them, that everybody has to have slides. You don't. It's only if they're needed. The first thing, you know, from a lot of the nervousness that's there, like I mentioned, can be a lack of preparation and that really not knowing what I'm going to say, or feeling that, you know, I'm just going to open my mouth and babble on, or that I'm going to go down as a sidetrack and start talking about something that I hadn't intended to, and going all sorts. So it's pull it back. Think about the preparation that you're going to be doing beforehand. So starting off, who's going to be listening to this? Who's the audience? What do they know already about the topic? What do you want them to know at the end? And how do you bridge that gap between where they are and where you want to bring them? What is the key message that you want them to take away? So in a sentence, how can you describe in a single sentence what you want them to know at the end of your presentation? Then you're thinking through, well, what's all of the information that I have on this? And chances are you've got a huge amount of information. You do not need to give all of that information to the audience. You're going to filter it down. What's appropriate for this audience to deliver this message? Then you're going to be taking a look at your structures and how you're going to put good structure in place, a logical structure, so it's going to flow very easily through each of the points. And the 3 is the magic number for this. If you've got 3 main points, that's great. If you've got one point divided into 3 sections, if it's a shorter speech, that works equally well. Then think about how you're going to get them engaged. What are you going to have as your hook at the beginning to really draw them in? And how are you going to finish off? What's your call to action? And when I'm working with clients, what I find is that by the time we have all of that done, it just relieves a huge amount of that worry and that tension about, I'm going to be so nervous and I don't know what I'm going to say and I don't know, and all of these concerns that they have. It makes it they're much more in control. And I suppose when we're feeling in control of something, then that relieves a lot of the tension and the worry that's associated with it. And then, of course, you have the practice side of things, that you're familiar rather than learning it off by heart, but that you internalize what the information is and that you're really familiar with it, that you have practiced maybe having interruptions. So, it could be a case that you say, right, I'm going to be delivering this presentation. It's going to take me 12 minutes to deliver it, but that you ask somebody to make a loud noise in the hall outside the door, so that you don't get thrown when something like that happens. You've practiced it. And particularly online, things go wrong. Your Wi-Fi drops or someone else's Wi-Fi drops or different things happen. So you have to be prepared for it. In a real life situation, I remember I was delivering a presentation once and someone spilt over an entire jug of water over the table that was as they were filling out a glass of water during the presentation. So you have to be prepared for these things. What are you going to do? Are you going to ignore it and plow on? Or are you going to acknowledge it and find your way back to where you were? Think about, what's your approach going to be? Pass it off as a joke, but the main thing is that you don't let it throw you, that you're not completely forgetting where you were or what you were saying, and that you've got all of the backup plans in place so that if you do forget your place, are you going to have pages and pages of notes that you have to go through? Or are you going to have keywords on cards that you can just glance down to have a look at to remind you of where you are and back on track? So there are a number of different strategies that are there that can help you to get ready for that presentation.
Mm-hmm. And also, my own little bit of advice to people is, if you're an inexperienced presenter, the less moving parts you have in a presentation, the better for you, because you're least likely to get confused. You're 2 years in business today, Maureen. Mm-hmm. What has been your biggest learning point over the past 2 years?
Oh my goodness, biggest learning point. It has been the steepest learning curve ever. I think going back to COVID, particularly from what was there, one of the eye-opening things for me was that you were talking there, John, about setting up your business during COVID. I think what has happened is that this whole idea of we can't do something was sort of thrown out the window. If we were told this time last year, or shortly before this time last year, that you can't travel, that you can't go to pubs or restaurants, that you can't visit family in different parts of the country, we said, oh, that's ridiculous. That'll never happen. And it has happened. But additionally, if you were told, well, think about the way that your business can expand or that you can do this, we might have said, I can't, or that can't happen, but it can. And that's a huge learning that I have taken from it. It really has allowed me the freedom to sort of say, look, give it a try. And if it works out, great. And if it doesn't work out, that's fine. This is a good time for experimentation, I think, at the moment. But with regard to learning, it's that cliche, every day is a learning day. It's just all of the time. There's just so much to learn. It's a big learning curve.
Yeah. And from my own experience of starting a business in the last 12 months, I have got 2 learning points to share with the audience. The first one is to have a small success every day, because the small successes lead eventually to the big success. And secondly, not to have too rigid a plan, because you may have to change course as you go along. Maureen, sure. Have you anything else to say to the audience, or have you anything to offer the audience today?
So what I would say, you mentioned earlier there, John, about my tagline is Unlock Speaking Confidence. And the thing about speaking confidence is that unless you are practicing, you won't improve. And if you're nervous speaking in front of an audience, then you need to speak in front of an audience to practice and to improve those skills. And, you know, you were talking there about small improvements and so on. If you have small goals for yourself, so you're nervous speaking in front of a group, you decide, right, okay, my goal that I'm setting myself at this next meeting is that I'm going to make one contribution, for example, at the meeting, if you don't normally say anything. And then you try and build on that the next time and give yourself credit for all of these small improvements that you make. The speaking confidence is inside in us, and that's why I can help people unlock it. I can give them tips and techniques, and we can go through structures and so on. But ultimately, it is down to the person themselves to put that into practice and to push themselves out there. You've mentioned comfort zones earlier. It's getting yourself out of that comfort zone, speaking in front of people, putting it into practice. And if anybody would like to follow me on social media, I share a lot of tips and a lot of video tips and advice that's there across all of the channels. You'll find me on Maureen McCowen on LinkedIn, and my YouTube channel is Soft Skills Success, and my website is softskillsuccess.ie.
Thank you, Maureen. And a link will be put into the video for all your social media and website contact details. This concludes the GYFT Show today. I would like to thank Maureen McCowen for sharing her knowledge of presenting with confidence. I would like to thank you, the audience, for your participation. I hope I've been able to answer all your questions. If there's something I have missed, please do not hesitate to reach out to me. My contact details will be on screen.